Morning. The meeting will come to order. Welcome to the Thursday, July 22nd meeting of the Public Safety and Neighborhood Services Committee. I'm Supervisor Gordon Marr, the chair of this committee, and I'm joined by Vice Chair Catherine Stefani and committee member Matt Haney. And we're also joined by Supervisor Stefani as the sponsor of item number 4. Thank you to this committee's clerk, John Carroll, and I'd also like to thank Kalina Mendoza of SFGov TV for staffing this meeting. Mr. Clerk, do you have any announcements?
Yes, I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The minutes will reflect that committee members participated in this meeting through video conference to the same extent as if physically present in their committee room. The board recognizes that public access to city services is essential and invites public participation in the following ways. First, public comment will be available on each item on today's agenda, either cable channel 26, 78, or 99, as well as sfgovtv.org are streaming the public comment call-in number across the screen at this time. Each speaker will be allowed 2 minutes to speak. Comments or other opportunities to speak during any of today's public comment periods are available to you via phone by dialing 415-655-0001. The meeting ID for today's meeting is 146-001-4815. Once you've entered the meeting ID for today's meeting, press the pound symbol twice to be connected to the meeting. When you're connected, you will hear the meeting discussions, but your line will be muted and in listening mode only. When your item of interest comes up on the agenda, dial star followed by 3 to be added to the speaker line to speak for that item. Best practices are to call from a quiet location, to speak clearly and slowly, and to turn down your television, your radio, your streaming device, or whatever you may be using to access the proceedings. Alternatively, you may submit written public comment in either of the following ways. You may email me. I'm the clerk of the Public Safety and Neighborhood Services Committee, and my email address is john.carroll@sfgov.org. Alternatively, you can send your written public comments to our office in City Hall. That is 1 Dr. Carlton B. Goodlett Place, room 244, San Francisco, California, 94102. Of course, all of this contact information is printed on every one of our meeting agenda, so you can consult it there if I am going too fast. And finally, items acted upon today are expected to appear on the Board of Supervisors agenda of September 7th, 2021, unless otherwise stated.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Can you please call item number 1?
Agenda item number 1 is an ordinance amending the police code to prohibit any person other than a licensed manufacturer or importer from possessing, selling, offering for sale, transferring, purchasing, transporting, receiving, or manufacturing an unfinished firearm frame or receiver that has not been imprinted with a serial number, subject to certain exceptions, and prohibiting any person from manufacturing or assembling a firearm that has not been imprinted with a serial number, subject to certain exceptions. Members of the public wish to provide public comment on this ordinance should call the public comment number. I'll repeat it, 415-655-0001. Enter the meeting ID of 146-001-4815. Press the pound symbol twice to connect to the meeting, and then press star followed by the number 3 to raise your hand to speak. Once you've done so, sit and wait until you hear a prompt that informs you that your line has been unmuted. When you hear that prompt, it is your time to begin your comments. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Thank you, Vice Chair Stefani, for just all of your incredible leadership on addressing the devastating impacts of the epidemic of gun violence on our communities. And thank you so much for bringing this important ordinance forward. Vice Chair Stefani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Marr. And I have to say, I woke up this morning to a text message from Chief Nicholson and Captain Yep about a shooting in my district last night. And those text messages are coming too frequently. And one of the reasons why is because of the proliferation of ghost guns in San Francisco. And I'm going to do everything in my power with a whole bunch of women and men and gun violence prevention advocates behind me to make sure that this stops. So the legislation today before you will ban the sale or possession of unserialized ghost gun kits in San Francisco. And right now, believe it or not, California law permits vendors to sell disassembled ghost gun kits without a serial number, requiring then the purchaser to obtain a serial number from the Department of Justice within 10 days of assembly. And if you know why people purchase these ghost guns, you know that they are not complying with this law. And I can promise you the vendors and those that are selling these kits at gun shows are not informing the purchaser that this is something that they need to comply with. So what happens when people are purchasing these ghost guns without a serial number? It means there's no background check, no waiting period, no sales record, and no age restrictions at the time of sale, which of course means a 10-year-old with a credit card could purchase one of these online. The massive loophole that the California state law is creating has allowed ghost guns to become the weapon of choice among those who are ordinarily prohibited from obtaining a firearm. And in San Francisco, ghost gun seizure increased by over 2,700% from 2016 to 2020, and this increase has continued into 2021. Ghost gun seizures were up 350% in January and February of this year over the same period 2 years ago. Ghost guns were less than 1% of all gun seizures in San Francisco in 2016, but by 2020, they were 16% of all firearms seized in San Francisco. And ghost guns are not just a problem only in San Francisco. The California Bureau of Firearms seized 512% more ghost guns in 2019 than in 2018. The ATF recently reported that 30% of crime guns recovered in California were ghost guns. And in January 2020, the ATF Los Angeles Field Divisions reported that over 40% of its cases involved ghost guns. Tragically, in San Francisco, the rise in ghost guns has accompanied a rise in gun violence in San Francisco. Overall shootings were up 62% in 2020 compared to 2019. And in the fourth quarter of 2020, shootings were up over 220%. And according to the San Francisco Police Department, that tragic trend has continued into 2021. They reported that shootings are up over 300% as compared to the same period last year. And just yesterday, I got the weekly crime trends report from SFPD. It is insane, the level of gun violence we are seeing in the city right now. In 2020, gun violence victims were at 51 year-to-date last year. This year, 108. Because the sale of ghost guns is legal, law enforcement is left reacting to their arrival often after a tragedy has occurred, as we continue to see in San Francisco. It also means that major manufacturers, retailers, and distributors can sell these ghost gun kits to anyone at any time over the internet. Polymer 80 is one of the largest manufacturers, and you can go on their website right now and order an AR-15 gun kit, or at least you could, except that they are almost entirely out of stock because the demand for these ghost guns is so high. When law enforcement recovers a ghost gun, they need to be able to hold the manufacturer and the distributor accountable for the harm they are knowingly causing. We all know that San Francisco alone will not solve this problem. Individuals who really want to order ghost guns will just go to another city. And I'm pleased to report that we've been working with San Diego, Los Angeles, San Jose, Oakland, Berkeley, Richmond, and San Mateo County to develop their own bans. Gun violence is not just some abstract social harm. Gun violence needlessly destroys the lives of families across the country every single day, and I know too many people who have tragically lost loved ones because of this epidemic in our country. Until the state or federal government steps up, we need to create a network of ghost gun bans across the state, and I am not waiting around for the state or the feds to act. I want to take a moment to thank the other organizations who made this possible and who power this movement. Brady United Against Gun Violence, the Giffords Law Center, Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, and United Playas. Thank you so much for always working with me to combat gun violence in San Francisco and California and nationwide. In particular, I want to individually thank Rudy Corpus, Maddie Scott, Celeste Perrone, Sigrid Nubla, and Mia Tretta for their leadership and exceptional advocacy. These are the people who are in the community each and every day. Their actions stop gun violence before it occurs, and they deal with the ramifications after it does. Lastly, I want to thank Ruth Borenstein and Tanya Sharp, who worked with me over the last 8 months to draft this ordinance. The seed of this idea came from the brilliant mind of Ruth, and we would not be here today without Ruth or Tanya. Today, we're going to hear from the following: San Francisco Police Commander Carl Fabry and Sergeant Patrick Fay on ghost guns in San Francisco. Ruth Borenstein, Brady United California co-policy lead on what this legislation does and why it's important. Stephen Lindley, Brady United California program manager. He's going to give us a demonstration on just how easy it is to obtain and assemble one of these ghost guns. And lastly, we're going to hear testimony from Mia Tretta, who is one of the bravest people I've ever met. She's an incredible activist and survivor of the Saugus High School shooting. And you know, I can't help but talk about this. I've been working on gun violence prevention since Columbine, since '99. And still 2021, I still get emotional because it cannot continue. And the fact that we have people that continue to never give up on this subject motivates me every single day. And the fact that I wake up this morning and hear about another shooting in my district, it just propels me forward to make sure that we are doing everything we can. And banning ghost guns is just one step in San Francisco. We have so much more to do. But like I said, I am so grateful for the people who show up for this every single day. And with that, I'll turn it over back to you, Chair Marr. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Stefani. And I think we could, unless Supervisor Haney, you have any remarks, or maybe we could move to the presentations. And would you like to introduce the presenters?
Yes, first up, I would like to call Commander Carl Fabry and Sergeant Patrick Fay.
Good morning, Supervisors. I'm Carl Fabry. I'm the Acting Commander of Investigations in the San Francisco Police Department. One of the units within the Investigations Bureau is what's known as CJIC. It's the Crime Gun Investigation Center. CJIC here at SFPD is a team of ATF agents and San Francisco police officers who work here at the Hall of Justice, and their mission is full-time enforcement of suspects who illegally possess firearms, as well as suspects who illegally manufacture and traffic firearms. Their investigations are sometimes very brief, as a one-off person who's possessing a firearm, and they range all the way up to suspects who are involved in trafficking, and those are more long-term investigations. Year to date, the San Francisco Police Department has seized 516 firearms compared to 485 last year, about a 6% increase in gun seizures by SFPD. Year to date, just to update the statistics that Supervisor Stefani brought up, we have 131 shooting victims in 2021, which is a 95% increase over 2020. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sergeant Pat Fay. He's one of the sergeants who's assigned full-time to our CJIC, and he's going to give you a presentation on ghost guns.
Good morning, Sergeant Fay here, and I'll be presenting this slideshow. Next slide, please. Okay, what is a privately manufactured firearm? A privately manufactured firearm, PMF, also commonly known as ghost gun or 80% firearms, are firearms that have been made from unfinished frames and receivers and that are absent the manufacturer's mark of identification. Basically, they're made with a variety of readily available parts, which are not subject to state or federal regulation. If you look at the picture here on the screen, this is an example of how one would make one. This is a jig, plastic, kind of reddish plastic is a jig provided by a company. You'll see the frame inside of that, and I've got 3 gold arrows there indicating how easy it is to show people where to drill, where you could manufacture this, drill the holes to make it a complete firearm. And again, that's just a portion of it, but I wanted to demonstrate how you would go about making one. Next slide, please. Dangers of PMFs. First off, as the supervisor mentioned, PMF parts and components are unregulated. This allows for people to circumvent background checks, circumvent a cooling off period, and to make record keeping virtually impossible unless someone were to actually get a serial, apply for and get a serial number from the Bureau of Firearms. This makes these firearms accessible to prohibited persons, be it prohibited by a criminal record, their court order, different court orders, restraining orders, that type of thing, or mental illness. Lack of record keeping obviously makes it very difficult to conduct these investigations. For example, California has what's called the APS list, the Armed and Prohibited Persons System. So, for example, if someone legally possessed a firearm and then while they were in legal possession of that firearm, they were to be arrested and convicted of a felony, they would be subject to a restraining order. If they had legally purchased it previously, there would be a record that that person possessed a firearm. We would be able to go out and seize the firearm. But if they have a PMF or a ghost gun, we wouldn't necessarily know about it until we went to their house or came into contact with that firearm somehow else. And the PMFs also make illegal purchase simplified. In the past, people have had to acquire firearms, purchase it illegally on the street, have a straw purchase, meaning someone who's not prohibited buy a firearm for someone who is prohibited and give it to them. In this case, that would not need to be done. And then on top of all of that, there's also the safety factors. As you can see from the previous slide with the plastic frame and the holes indicated grill, they're not made to proper quality control standards, making them prone to malfunction or unintended discharge. The pictures associated with this slide on the left are PMFs that were in possession of people that were prohibited. On the top left, you can see the gentleman, these were recovered after a search warrant. The gentleman was in possession of several of the plastic frames or the jig used to make it, and we came into contact with that individual who was on felony probation after he had discharged a firearm outside of his house. And then in the bottom left, you'll see another PMF that was seized after a search warrant involving two individuals, both of whom were on parole, were engaged in a gunfight. The investigation led us to them, and the search warrant led to the recovery of that PMF. Next slide, please. On this slide, you'll see the PMF recoveries by the San Francisco Police Department. On the top half, you'll see the bar graph showing year to date. So as of June 30th, 2021, and then as of June 30th from 2018, 2019, and 2020. So obviously you'll see this year we're more than double what we had last year at this point for PMFs. And then if you look below that, it's got the list of PMFs end of year totals or year end totals. And you'll see the percentage increase each year for that. Next slide, please. Thank you. Are there any questions?
No. Thank you so much, Captain Fabry and Sergeant Fay for the presentations.
Thank you. Do you want me to call the next person, Chair Mark?
Yeah.
Thank you. Ruth Borenstein from Brady United. She's the California Co-Policy Lead. Hi, Ruth.
Hi, thank you. Good morning. I am in fact Ruth Borenstein. I'm a San Francisco resident and volunteer with Brady, where, as the supervisor said, I'm now the Legislation and Policy Chair for California. Brady strongly supports this ordinance, and we are grateful to Supervisor Stefani for working with us on it, for introducing it, and also to my supervisor, Supervisor Mandelman, for co-sponsoring it. It is crucial that San Francisco take immediate action to address the threat of ghost guns, which are proliferating throughout our city, state, and country. Ghost guns are increasingly becoming the crime gun of choice for people who cannot lawfully buy firearms in California. Ghost guns are designed and marketed for the very purpose of avoiding gun violence prevention laws, such as background checks and waiting periods. They appeal to criminals because they lack serial numbers and therefore cannot be traced if used in a crime. and they cost far less than firearms produced by licensed manufacturers. As a result, any person with cash in hand, whether a domestic abuser, teenager, gun trafficker, or a person contemplating suicide, can purchase the components to easily build a working handgun or even an assault weapon. The components are often packaged together in kits containing everything needed to assemble a working firearm, including a jig and drill bits, using tools that are available in most homes and any hardware store. The completed DIY firearms look, feel, and function like any other gun, although without critical safety features required by California law. The rise of ghost guns presents a dangerous and deadly threat. The number of ghost guns recovered in California is increasing exponentially, including, as you have heard, in San Francisco. We have seen ghost guns used in mass shootings, school shootings, killings of law enforcement, community violence, and domestic violence. We must take meaningful action on ghost guns, and we must take that action on a local level. California has long been the country's leader in gun violence prevention laws, which is why our state was the first to experience a rise in ghost guns seeking to evade those laws. Unfortunately, California is behind the curve in responding to this problem. Our legislature did pass a bill in 2016 that would have treated the main components of ghost guns as firearms, but then Governor Brown inexplicably vetoed it. All we have now is a largely ignored law that requires a person to apply to the DOJ for a serial number before assembling a gun, and then affix that serial number to the gun after it's assembled. It's simply absurd to think that the people who are building ghost guns precisely because the guns don't have serial numbers will comply. And DOJ doesn't check to see if purchasers do apply for a serial number or if serial numbers that are obtained are ever affixed onto assembled guns. California has another law that was passed in 2019 but won't take effect until next July. That law will require sellers of the main precursor parts of ghost guns to be licensed and to run an instant background check on buyers. But that background check won't look at national databases as California requires for sales of firearms. And it still will not require that a serial number be affixed to the parts before they are transferred to the buyer. On the federal level, we know that Congress is deadlocked, so a federal law banning ghost guns is not in the cards in the foreseeable future. We do have President Biden's recent executive order directing the Attorney General to address the issue, and the AG has now issued proposed regulations that will treat unfinished frames and receivers as firearms throughout the country. This is a major step forward, but enacting the regulations will take time. There's a public comment period that we're in now. Then there'll be a review period and possible revisions. Even when ultimately finalized, the regulations will have to be published and there'll be another waiting period before they actually take effect. And it is likely that the gun lobby will challenge the regulations in court, causing further delay. In addition, because they're done by executive action and not a legislation from Congress, they can be undone by a subsequent president. We saw that when the former administration issued executive orders undoing President Obama's executive orders. The bottom line is that we can't wait until we get strong state and federal laws in place. We must act now on the local level. San Francisco's proposed ordinance will be a huge step forward in combating the rise of ghost guns and has already become a model for communities throughout California. I urge the committee to vote for the ordinance, and I'm hopeful that the full board will pass it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. I think you said it perfectly when you said it's absolutely absurd that we don't have anything on the books in California and that we're having to act like this locally to combat the rise of ghost guns in this nation. It's absurd that there's nothing at the state or the federal level to combat this problem. Next up, we have a demonstration by Stephen Lindley with Brady United. He's the California Program Manager. Stephen. I think you're on mute.
Good morning. My name is Steve Lindley. I spent 28 years in law enforcement and 10 years as the California Department of Justice's chief for the Bureau of Firearms. So One of the things that people talk about is really what is a ghost gun. An excellent presentation by the police department, but this is the kit that you could buy at your gun show, at a store, or you can get sent to your house online with no regulations, because under ATF current regulations, this is basically considered plastic and metal. The problem with it is, and I'll open the box, is everything that you need in order to put the firearm together is here. You first start off with the jig, as you previously seen. And there are 3 holes for you to go ahead and drill, as again demonstrated by the police department. There's also 4 pieces right here for you to cut off. And the jig clearly tells you what you need to remove and where you need to drill. Once that's done, all the components of the firearm, including the slide, the barrel assembly, spring, trigger assembly, everything else is in the kit. So if you can put together a model airplane, put together a model car, or a Lego set, you could put together a ghost gun in probably about 25 minutes using nothing but a drill. Because also in the package comes the sanding stone in order to remove the pieces of plastic, and the 2 different drill bits that you're going to need in order to drill it. It's all in one package. So when people talk about that it is for a person who is a firearm enthusiast that wants to put together their own firearm, that's not really the case, because there's really not any manufacturing that's being done by the individual. They're just following directions. All the components are there, and you're not adding any pieces. You're actually taking off 4 pieces of cheap plastic and drilling 3 holes. After that, you follow the directions on how to put together the firearm, and you're good to go. 20 minutes. This is exclusively designed to be marketed to people who can't otherwise purchase a firearm because they're prohibited or they're underage. And that's why we see the huge increase in crime gun seizures that are considered ghost guns. Thank you. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for all the work you're doing on this. Unless my colleagues have any questions, I was going to go to the next presenter. Looks like it's fine. So next up we have Mia Tretta, who is a survivor of gun violence and part of Students Demand Action. And I have to say, being the mother of a 16-year-old son going into his junior year in high school, a 12-year-old daughter going into her 7th grade, and knowing that the day of Sandy Hook, my son was in 2nd grade and I was in his classroom that very morning as it was because it was his birthday, and dropping off cupcakes and watching all the kids take off their backpacks and hang their coats up, and saying bye to him that morning and all his friends, and getting in my car and turning on the radio and listening to what was happening in a town I never heard of before, in Newtown, Connecticut, and knowing that 20 first graders were killed in their classroom and 6 educators, and still we couldn't get Congress to pass a universal background check bill. And now we're here 2021, and we're going to hear a tragic story from Mia that we are failing our children. And we absolutely need to keep doing everything we can to make sure we are eliminating the gun violence epidemic in this country. It is unfair what we have put our children through. And with that, Mia, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm Mia Tretta.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Tretta, Mia's mom.
On November 14th, 2019, I was a freshman at Saugus High School. I was hanging out with my friends in the quad, and like I did every day before class. We were excitedly talking about the school dance the next day, but really nervous for our big Spanish test that we probably didn't study enough for. Suddenly there was a big bang. Another bang came, and I was on the ground. Shock and adrenaline got me up, and I was able to run across campus to my Spanish classroom, convincing myself it was a really, really good simulation. I sat in my normal assigned seat, and it was only then that I realized I was shot. And it was real. From there, the police came, and I was ambulanced to a nearby park and airlifted to the hospital I was treated at. There we learned I was shot in my lower abdomen, and my best friend wasn't as lucky enough to run away. In a matter of seconds, a boy I didn't know shot 5 kids, killing 2, one of them being my best friend.
It wasn't until Mia was out of the hospital 6 days later that we learned she was shot by a .45 caliber ghost gun. And like a lot of you, we had absolutely no idea what that was. And unfortunately, now we do, and it's terrifying.
Ghost guns are guns sold often online in kits that are easily assembled. Ghost guns are a clear choice for criminals who can't pass a background check, and we learned that the shooter's father was banned from owning or possessing a firearm, and he had all of his legal firearms confiscated by the police.
However, like the loophole you talked about in the system, it allowed this man to find himself a firearm. He went online and he purchased one from a place that had no age restrictions, no registration, no permit, no questions, and most importantly, no background check.
Had the shooter's father not been able to purchase that ghost gun, I likely wouldn't be talking here today. I'd just be a normal kid heading into my junior year. Instead, I'm a school shooting survivor, with an emotional scar of losing my best friend and a physical scar I bear across my stomach. That was a tragedy that day, all around. It's a tragedy every day in the state when we lose another kid my age to gun violence. But the biggest tragedy is watching it happen and doing nothing to stop it.
Our family thanks you guys so much, Supervisor Stefani, for trying to stop this. We need all of you.
Ghost guns need to be classified as guns, and ghost guns should be illegal to own without serialization, a permit, and a background check. This ordinance will save lives, and thank you all for everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mia, and thank you, Tiffany. As a mom, Tiffany, I don't know what you have had to go through, but thank you for being here, and thank you for your brave daughter. We will do everything we can, I know, in San Francisco to stop it, and hopefully, as goes San Francisco, we like to say, so goes the rest of California, and hopefully then the nation. So with that, I don't know, colleagues, if you have any questions. I know we have public comment as well.
Vice Chair Stefani, I just really wanted to also thank Mia for your courage in speaking out about the terrible tragedy at your high school. I'm a dad of a high school student myself, so this really hits home to me. But thank you so much for turning that tragedy, into activism and advocacy, and just for being such a strong voice for ending gun violence and now specifically properly regulating ghost guns and really getting them out of our communities. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Supervisor Haney.
Thank you, Supervisor Stefani, and thank you for your leadership. I also want to thank Mia and her family for their courage, and we really do need to put a stop to this, and we need to take action. And your voice and your leadership is going to be a huge part of what spurs government to take action and understand the threat that these guns present, and the consequences if we don't take action. And I do want to thank all of the other presenters as well. We continue to be, as Supervisor Stefani said, plagued by gun violence here in San Francisco. Just a few days ago in my district, there was a 15-year-old boy who was killed on the street. And we are continuing to experience these tragedies, and the things that we can do here locally to get dangerous guns and weapons out of the hands of people, we have to do. And so thank you, Supervisor Stefani, and of course, very supportive of your work on this.
Great. Thanks again, Vice Chair Stefani, for bringing this forward. Maybe we can go to public comment. That's okay with you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're working with Araceli Frias from the Department of Technology to bring in any public comment callers that have already queued up to provide comment on this item. For those who are watching our meeting on cable channel 26 or via a streaming link or through sfgovtv.org or elsewhere, if you wish to speak on this item, please call in now. Follow the instructions that are displaying on your screen. That would be by dialing 415-655-0001. Enter the meeting ID of 146001-4815. Press the pound symbol twice and then press star followed by 3 to enter the queue to speak. For those who have already connected to our meeting via phone, please press star followed by 3 to be added to the queue if you wish to speak for this item. And for those who are already on hold in the queue, please continue to wait until you are prompted to begin. You will hear a prompt that informs you that your line has been unmuted. Mr. Chair, I'm hearing that we have about a half dozen callers. Ms. Frias, could you please connect us to our first public comment caller?
Hi, my name is Celeste Perrin. I'm a local leader with San Francisco Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense and a District 8 resident. I'd like to thank Supervisor Stefani for leading the charge on stopping the spread of dangerous ghost guns in San Francisco and in California. As you've heard today, gun violence is such a crisis in our city, in our state, and our country that we need to pull absolutely every lever we can to stop it. And, you know, I'm just hopeful that the committee and the Board of Supervisors will pass this ordinance and that other cities and communities around the country will follow suit and show that we need to have a zero tolerance policy towards these dangerous, untraceable, unregulated guns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Celeste Perrin, for sharing your comments. Ms. Frias, could you bring us the next caller, please?
Hi, excuse me. Hi, my name is Lorraine Meyer. I am a volunteer with Moms Demand Action as well, and I am thankful for Supervisor Stefani in leading this charge. Stopping the spread of ghost guns in California communities should be a top priority for our cities. I am, every time, you know, listening to Mia speak, I'm a mother and a grandmother. I live in the Outer Sunset. And, you know, I'm worried about my grandkids and my family every single day because of gun violence. A friend of mine just recently told me, a friend that's an educator just recently was talking about a son and a father that he is a son that he is teaching, and the son's father that are bonding while making ghost guns in their home. Dad and son time. What a way! What can go wrong here? I mean, what is going on that this is allowed to happen in our community? We must take action on ghost guns. When a 10-year-old can purchase one of these kits as easily as they can purchase boba, there is something absurdly wrong. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comments. Could we get the next caller, please?
Hi, my name is James Naughton. I'm a San Francisco resident. I'm greatly concerned about gun violence in this country, and I believe that ghost guns are making a bad problem even worse. It just makes perfect sense that we should try to combat this problem because it's just allowing guns to proliferate to a point where we have zero control over them. So it really makes sense to start here and focus some efforts on ghost guns at this time. Stopping the spread of ghost guns in California communities should be a top priority for our cities. I'm thankful that former Moms Demand Action volunteer and current San Francisco Board of Supervisors, Catherine Stefani, is leading the charge. Ghost guns allow people who cannot legally purchase or possess guns to circumvent state and federal laws, such as background checks and waiting periods. Ghost guns also undermine the work of law enforcement. Because ghost guns have no serial numbers, it is impossible for law enforcement to effectively trace these firearms when they are used to commit crimes. When law enforcement officers recover unserialized and therefore untraceable guns at crime scenes, their criminal investigations are stymied before they even start. I appreciate all your efforts on gun violence, and thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comments with the committee. Could we get the next caller, please?
Hello, thank you for taking my public comment today. My name is Ewan Barker Plummer. I am a youth activist and organizer here in San Francisco. I am a Students Demand Action volunteer, and I am urging you all to support this life-saving legislation. Stopping the spread of ghost guns in California communities should be a top priority for our cities and their leaders. This is an opportunity for our city to lead the nation and create a model for other cities, counties, states, and soon the nation. We have made history on common sense gun safety laws before. Let's do it again. I'm thankful that former Moms Demand Action volunteer and current SF supervisor, Catherine Stefani, is leading the charge. I would also like to thank Supervisor Raphael Mandelman for co-sponsoring this legislation as well. I urge all of you to support this legislation at this committee, as well as on the full Board of Supervisors. It will save lives and make our communities safer. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comments. Mr. Chair, I'm hearing from Ms. Frias that was our last caller for this agenda item.
Thank you. SFGov TV public comment is closed. And I really wanted to, again, thank you, Vice Chair Stefani, and to all the presenters, Captain Fabry and Sergeant Faye from SFPD, Ruth Bornstein and Steve Lindley from Brady United, and then especially Mia and Tiffany for your presentations. This was an extremely informative hearing on an issue that I have to confess I wasn't as well informed or aware of, but I think from all the presentation, I share the great concern and alarm about this trend of ghost guns proliferating in our communities and really being a major contributor to gun violence in our state and our country. So thank you, Vice Chair Stefani, for bringing this really important legislation forward. I think it's really good to see San Francisco, really having to lead on this much needed effort to get ghost guns out of our communities in our state and our country. And I would love to be added as a co-sponsor as well. Supervisor Haney.
Thank you, Chair Marr. I echo that sentiment and really do think that this is action that we need to take and will protect people. And these are terrifying weapons. If it wasn't already a huge threat in terms of how easy it is to get guns, this has made it much worse. So I would also like to be added as a co-sponsor, and thank you, Supervisor Stefani, for your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Marr and Supervisor Haney, for your co-sponsorship. I greatly appreciate it. And I just want to thank the presenters again, and Commander Fabry and Sergeant Faye, Ruth Bornstein and Stephen Lindley with Brady United, and of course, Tiffany and Mia. Thank you so much again for being here. You were here when we announced this, and I can't thank you enough for your advocacy and your bravery, and know that we're always here for you. I also want to thank those who called in today, public comment, Celeste Perrin, Lorraine Meyer, James Naughton. I've worked with them for so long. They are incredible advocates. And Ewan, a high school student who is with Students Demand Action, who is just very motivated to continue to advocate for the safety of his friends and family and those in this country that are suffering every day from the trauma that gun violence has. The grip that it has on this country is just undeniable, and it has to stop. I also want to thank Andy Mullen and my staff, my chief of staff, for helping with this ordinance, and Brad Rusi in the city attorney's office, deputy city attorney, who has drafted several pieces of gun violence prevention legislation for me. So thank you, Brad. And lastly, I just want to say to the vendors and to the gun lobby and those that would continue to wreak havoc on our communities, in our state, in our country, we will not allow you to do it. And we will keep coming for you, and we will make sure that this stops. Trust me. So I just want to say, again, thank you to all those that have co-sponsored this with me, Supervisor Mandelman for being an early co-sponsor, and thank you again, Chair Marr and Supervisor Haney. and all those who are continuing this fight. It's not an easy one, but it's one we will never give up. So with that, I'd like to move that we send this to the full board with positive recommendation.
Thank you, Vice Chair Stefani. Mr. Clerk, please call roll.
On the motion offered by Vice Chair Stefani that this be recommended to the Board of Supervisors, Vice Chair Stefani.
Aye.
Stefani, aye. Member Haney.
Aye.
Haney, aye. Chair Mar.
Aye.
Mar, aye. Mr. Chair, there are 3 ayes.
Great. Thanks again, everyone, for this really important hearing, and this item will be sent to the full board with positive recommendation. Mr. Clerk, please call item number 2.
Agenda item number 2 is an ordinance amending the administrative code to require the police department and the district attorney to submit monthly reports to the Board of Supervisors regarding the number of cases of domestic violence. Members of the public who wish to provide public comment on this ordinance should call the public comment call-in number, which is 415-655-0001. Today's meeting ID is 146-001-4815. Press the pound symbol twice to connect to the meeting, and then press the star key followed by the number 3 to enter the queue to speak. Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Thanks again, Vice Chair Stefani, for bringing this other very important legislation forward. I understand you have a motion you'd like to make around it.
Yes, thank you, Chair Mar, first of all, for scheduling this item. And today I'd like to introduce an amendment, which I shared with your offices this morning. And the amendment aligns the reporting requirements in this ordinance with quarterly reporting requirements that already exist in the police code. And then after we take these amendments, I'd like to continue this item to the call of the chair. There are some important policy questions that I would like to get answered before this item is heard before the committee, but I would request that we continue it to the call of the chair, but that we hear it as soon as possible. I introduced this legislation because I was hearing rumblings from the domestic violence community that cases were just not being prosecuted. And rather than just go on anecdotal evidence, I got that data from the police department. In Q4 of last year, they presented 131 felony domestic violence cases to the DA, and 113 cases were dismissed. And unfortunately, I just saw more statistics yesterday that confirmed to me that domestic violence cases are not being prosecuted. Felony domestic violence cases, which are the most serious, having prosecuted them myself when I was a prosecutor in Contra Costa County. So I will request that we move this to the call of the chair, but knowing Chair Mar that this is an item that I feel is very urgent and we need to hear it as soon as possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Stefani, for sponsoring this legislation, for presenting the amendments today, and then for the motion to continue this item to the call of the chair. I think we should take public comment on this right now. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll reach out to Araceli Frias from Department of Technology, who's checking to see if we have any callers in the queue. For those who are watching our meeting on cable channel 26 or via streaming link through sfgovtv.org or elsewhere. If you wish to speak on this item, please call in now by following the instructions displaying on your screen. Dial 415-655-0001. Enter the meeting ID of 146-001-4815. Press the pound symbol twice and then press star followed by 3 to be entered into the queue to speak. And Mr. Chair, I'm receiving word from Ms. Frias that we have no callers in the queue for this agenda item.
Great. Public comment is now closed. Mr. Clerk, can you please call roll on to adopt the amendments introduced by Vice Chair Stefani?
And the motion is offered by Vice Chair Stefani? To amend, on the motion offered by Vice Chair Stefani to amend the ordinance, Vice Chair Stefani.
Aye.
Stefani, aye. Member Haney.
Aye.
Haney, aye. Chair Mar.
Aye.
Mar, aye. Mr. Chair, there are 3 ayes on the amendments.
And Vice Chair Stefani also made a motion to continue this item to the call of the chair.
On the motion offered by Vice Chair Stefani that this item be continued to the call of the chair as amended, Vice Chair Stefani.
Aye.
Stefani, aye. Member Haney.
Aye.
Haney, aye. Chair Mar.
Aye.
Mar, aye. Mr. Chair, there are 3 ayes.
Great, thank you. And Vice Chair Stefani will work with your office to schedule this when you're ready to move forward with it.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, please call item number 3.
Agenda item number 3 is a hearing to discuss the city's plans and efforts to prepare for the 2021 wildfire season, including plans for indoor wildfire refuges, proactive measures to mitigate the impact of wildfire smoke, and what steps are being prepared for increased